Greetings, fellow humans. You know me as Iceman Caesar, and this is what's up in the world today. Gonna be running through some of my favorite memories from the last 25 years of Monday Night Raw. Big anniversary show goes down tonight. Should be a great night. Gonna start running through just run through a bunch of memories, and then finish off at the end with a top 20. So, not going to waste any more time, got a long way to go. So, start with a little bit of history. The first episode of Raw aired January 11th, 1993 for everybody in the US. And the first episode here in Canada aired on TSN, I believe, late 1995. So my first memories of Raw are being a heartbroken little kid at home wishing I could watch it. So I was very, very grateful when TSN started showing it in 1995, and we got it regularly from then on. I'm going to start with three moments, or three things that I really felt helped establish Raw early on as not only a must-see show, but just gave it a foundation to get through some of the tough years that were coming up for the WWF. The first thing I really feel helped establish it was the 1-2-3 Kids upset over Razor Ramon. If you didn't grow up in the enhancement talent era, you really don't understand how big of a moment this was. Guys like the 1-2-3 Kid just did not beat guys like Razor Ramon. I mean, Razor Ramon was a big deal, just main evented the Royal Rumble against Bret Hart. I mean, just guys like Razor did not lose to guys like the 1-2-3 Kids. So when this went down, it was one of the craziest moments all across the wrestling business. I mean, everybody had to get eyes on Raw to see, what went down. And it just really helped establish Raw as a must-see show and, give it a foundation going forward. Second thing I feel really contributed to that was the Shawn Michaels Marty Jannetty feud, especially Marty winning his first Intercontinental title on Raw. Oh man, as a kid, not being able to see that moment just killed me. But it really established in me that I need to find a way to watch Raw. Like Raw is the must-see show going forward, and things like this were just huge in establishing that. Third thing I feel early on really helped contribute to that was the Loser Leaves Town match, Ric Flair and Mr. Perfect. They hyped it up in the Royal Rumble 1993, but knowing I wouldn't be able to watch Raw as a kid just killed me. And when I was able to track the match down years later, saw that it was a really great match. So, it just helps establish that not only is Raw a place where big angles are going to go down, but you're going to see great matches too. And so I feel those three things are very important to, helping make Raw into the show that it is today and what it became during its biggest years. So, moving on, most of the original DX stuff is in my top 20, so we'll go right to the Triple H DX. And man, that night after WrestleMania 14, it's when Shawn Michaels had to take care of himself and go home. It's like, can Triple H and Chyna pick the ball up and run with it? And that's exactly what they did. Triple H cut a great promo, brought out X-Pac as a big surprise. He cut a great promo. They hooked up with the New Age Outlaws at the end, who everyone wanted to see in DX anyways. So it was just a great way to start out this next DX run. And they ended up putting up some really awesome moments. The DX invasion, I think that's a little bit overstated on the Monday Night War series they do on the WWE Network, but it's still a huge moment. And for me, it was huge because it kind of showed me that WWF was the dominant force in this war, and that they were eventually going to win. Because to me, they walked right up to WCW's doorstep, knocked on the door, rang the doorbell, and WCW just stayed inside, peering through the curtains, And that to me was like, okay, WWF is the big dog. They are going to win this fight. They're going to win this war, and that was one of the things that to me really established it. So that was a great moment. DX is the Nation, one of the funniest things that's ever happened on Raw, and successfully doing things like that was so important to helping people kind of forget about the original DX and really focus on the new run that they were going on, because they did a lot of great stuff and arguably took DX to even greater heights than the original. So, but then, as always, things got to come to an end, and right around the time DX was ending, we got one of the greatest swerves in Raw history. Triple H showing up and revealing to everyone that he had already married Stephanie McMahon. One of the craziest moments on Raw for sure. I mean, just kind of like Hogan in the NWO. He saw that money train leaving and not without me, brother. And Triple H saw that money train leaving, not without me, brother. But it ended up being one of the greatest angles in Raw history. I don't think anybody, it's a wrestling wedding, so you think something's going to happen, but I don't think anybody expected Triple H to come out and say he was already married to Steph, so that was another great moment. Going to talk about a few of the great matches that I remember in Raw history. Owen Hart and the British Bulldog versus Shawn Michaels and Steve Austin from 1997. Just when you talk about greatest Raw matches in history, everyone always points to this match as one of them. And it was just incredible. Four of the greatest talents in the history of the business, all in the same ring at the same time. You know you're going to get something great. And that's exactly what they delivered on Raw in 1997. We have Eddie Guerrero versus RVD, the ladder match, I believe 2002. What an incredible match. Just sucks it had to have a moment ruined by that loser getting in the ring, putting these guys in more danger than they're already in. But other than that little black cloud, this was an incredible match. And I believe this is one of the first matches back for Eddie Guerrero after he had to take some time off to deal, battling the demons. He'd battle his whole life. But coming back, he needed to show everybody that Latino heat was still there, and he was still one of the best in the world, and that's exactly what these guys did, putting on an incredible ladder match that's still talked about to this day. Triple H versus Shawn Michaels, last Raw of the year, I believe 2003. I'm sorry I don't have the exact dates, but I was kind of going through these rapid fire and forgot to write the dates down. But Triple H and Shawn Michaels had a match at the end on the last Raw of the year. Absolutely incredible match. Crowd is on fire. Has a little bit of a funky finish, so might not be remembered as fondly as I. Other people might not see it as fondly as I do, but I just remember that being an incredible match, and I was on the edge of my seat the entire time, hoping Shawn would be able to do it. Another match, Jeff Hardy versus The Undertaker, the ladder match. Just an incredible match. Really helped, give Jeff Hardy the respect he deserved in the wrestling business, and helped set him up for the, for the singles run that he was going to go on. And it also gave the new Undertaker character, the American Badass, Big Evil, gave him a really great match to, sink his feet into in the dirt, because changing up from, it was a pretty big change going from, the dead man Undertaker to, badass Big Evil. So, having a great match to kind of hang your hat on is pretty important, I feel. And they definitely delivered that one. Let's go into some Steve Austin moments. The beer bash, I know arguably that's the greatest moment in Raw history. For me, there's a few more that kind of meant more to me, but beer bash was an absolutely incredible moment. I mean, just perfect for the Stone Cold character. How awesome is it to drive a beer truck down to a ring full of your enemies talking shit about you, and shut their mouths by just spraying them full of beer? Vince McMahon with the great sell swimming in the middle of the ring is just an absolutely, just a great segment to watch live, and even years down the road, even today, it's just you can put yourself right in the moment and just feel that excitement build in you. And it's just that moment really is one of them that sums up the Stone Cold Steve Austin characters, why he had the impact he did, and why he was as great as he was. And the hospital skit, another moment that's arguably near the top, but to me, this is the funniest segment in the history of professional wrestling. The interactions between Mankind and Vince are absolutely hysterical. But when Austin starts beating on him, and to me, the moment where Austin's pounding on the cast and Vince is screaming, that's the funniest moment in wrestling history. And that moment's up there with Marv screaming in Home Alone when they put the spider on his face. To me, those two are right up there in the same conversation. Every time I watch it, I just hysterically laugh. It was to me, that's the funniest segment in the history of wrestling, and it definitely deserves the credit that it gets. Austin saves Stephanie McMahon from the Dark Wedding. That is one of my favorites. Didn't get played a lot, probably because of the content, but as a teenager, growing up, I really loved that moment. And it was just a great storyline. Here's Austin and McMahon, they absolutely hate each other, and Vince McMahon makes a deal with a guy that he can't control, and all of a sudden he finds himself in big trouble, and he realizes the only guy he can turn to, the only guy that can possibly save the day, is his worst enemy, guy he hates more than anyone, Stone Cold Steve Austin. And Steve Austin doesn't exactly want to help his worst enemy, but at the same time, Stephanie McMahon was innocent in the whole storyline, so Austin's a good guy deep down, so he wants to help out in that way. And it's will Austin show up and help? And right towards the end of the ceremony, the glass broke, and just an awesome moment for the Steve Austin character, one that I stuck with me. I really loved. And oh man, JR was at his best, and Steve Austin absolutely tattoos Mideon with a chair shot. Like you can probably still hear it ringing today. Like, but just overall a great segment and a great end to the story that they were trying to tell. Just one of my favorite moments in Raw history, that's for sure. Another kind of run of moments that doesn't get talked about a lot is after Kane debuted at Bad Blood in 1997, he'd show up on Raw and basically every week until WrestleMania, and he fought The Undertaker. He'd randomly come down during a match and absolutely destroy whoever was in the ring. And it really helped make Raw, it was a cool part of Raw during that time. That was the end of 97 into 98 when Raw really started to turn the tide and eventually start beating WCW again. But that, to me, was one of the unsung parts of Raw that really helped it, establish it again, coming out of the tough times as a must-see show and, the show to watch. And, that Kane character was, he was new, he looked cool, he looked kind of, he had that Michael Myers vibe, so, you're really intense, and wrestling is predetermined, but it's like this guy he just had that vibe to him where you're just kind of like, I don't know, you take a step back when Kane is walking around, especially in the early days before he had developed any of the other personality that they gave him during his career. But to me, like, I always just, on the edge of my seat, when's Kane coming out? Who's he going to destroy this week? So that run of Kane destroying everyone, I think it doesn't get talked about enough. Moving to the highest rated segment in the history of Raw, This Is Your Life. I don't think anybody at the time watching it would have put their money on it being the highest rated segment in the history of Raw, but it just all the elements are there for it to be the greatest segment. I mean, you got the two of the greatest performers and characters in the history of wrestling, The Rock and Mankind, pretty much at their absolute best around this time, going toe to toe with each other, and the content that they had, all the characters Mick brought out were just perfect for the type of jokes they were trying to tell, and The Rock was just absolutely on the money, firing just the brutal insults to every single one. It was just entertaining to watch. I mean, at no point I think are you looking at your watch or getting bored or anything. It's like it's just fun to be in that moment and watch that entire segment play out. It's just when you watch it and you don't know it's the highest rated, you probably would never guess that, but I think it's definitely the elements are there to justify it being the highest for sure. I'm gonna talk about a guilty pleasure feud that I liked on Raw. I was always a big mark of Kai and Tai, especially the Dick Togo version with Dick Togo, Men's Tay, Funaki, and Taka Michinoku with Yamaguchi-san managing them. Man, I thought that was a fire team. I was a huge fan of those guys, and all four of those guys could really go in the ring. So I had high expectations for what we were going to see in the WWF from Kai and Tai, and really, I was really disappointed that I think that version only lasted maybe a month or two, maybe 3 months, but it wasn't very long before it kind of broke up and just went back to Taka and Funaki. But man, with the four of them and Yamaguchi-san, I thought they were an awesome group, and I really thought they could have done a lot more. And I actually, as a kid, I was also a Val Venus mark, so I enjoyed that little choppy your pee-pee storyline. I know everyone laughs at it and thinks it's the worst, but I don't know. To me, I thought it was silly and entertaining, and I had fun watching it and laughing at it. And like I say, I was a big fan of Kai and Tai, a fan of Val Venus, so it was one of my guilty pleasures that I enjoyed during the Raw run. Moving to Edge and Christian had tons of great moments, but one of their early ones that doesn't really get talked about, that it's always stuck out as the funniest moment to me, and just the number one moment. We always used to bring it up when between me and my friends that were wrestling fans, but it was right at the start when they started to become smarky heels. They were doing commentary, and they're at the table, and JR looks over at them and says, "Well, what are you guys doing out here tonight?" And Edge responds with, "Well, JR, we're going to do a run-in." And Jerry Lawler is, "A run-in, JR? You hear that? What do you think?" And JR responds, "Well, I'm somewhat shocked by their bluntness." And that was just such a contrast from what you'd usually hear from two guys sitting at the announce table. That was always stuck out to me. I thought it was hilarious and one of the great moments from the Edge and Christian run. And then one of the moments where you're only going to see on wrestling, Bubba Ray Dudley powerbombing. I think she was in her 80s at this point, but An old lady off of the stage through a table. Only in wrestling are you gonna see that. But man, what a spirit Mae Young was, man. Like, I mean, in your prime, taking a bump like that is, you'd be nervous enough. But for her at her age, to be game to do something like that, man, it's like you got to have some fire in your soul, and I think it's very clear that Mae Young had a lot, and that was, it might not, kind of a controversial moment, but it was, it's definitely one of those crazy moments that helped establish the Attitude Era and made Raw must see TV during that time. And then Kurt Angle coming out with the milk truck, that was just, when you have Steve Austin, you don't really think you can kind of top Steve Austin in the beer truck, but, with Kurt Angle and how the milk was all part of his character, and with Steve Austin being a heel, you need to kind of find some way to get one over on Austin. And how much more perfect is that to drive a milk truck to the ring and do the same thing Austin did with beer and just soak everyone? I just thought that moment is right up there with one of the greatest. Probably should be on my top 20, but like I say, there was just a few more that kind of just stuck out and meant a little bit more to me. But if I had a top 25, the milk truck would definitely be going on it. And this is just, really helped establish Kurt Angle put him on that level with Steve Austin. Because, it's like Steve Austin had all these moments on Raw to establish him as a character. And, Kurt Angle was starting to build his, but his was more kind of, more goofy and comedy, whereas with the milk truck, this is like putting it right back in Steve Austin's face, and just, for a character like Steve Austin, that's hard to do, but this moment, Kurt Angle, I think, really accomplished getting one over on Austin. The only thing that stands out to me is that you can really see Steve Austin trying so hard not to sell that milk. Like, he is trying as hard as he can not to sell it, and I don't think Kurt Angle notices, because if that was me, I would have been pointing that thing at his crotch, at his chest, just anything to get him to sell it. But it was a great moment and deserves its place up top on the history of Raw moments. Then moving to a moment that I don't think anybody thought we'd ever see, and a moment we were looking for when WWF bought WCW and the whole Invasion storyline was going down. Hulk Hogan stare down with The Rock as they set up their match for WrestleMania. Just one of the most surreal, awesome moments in the history of Raw. I still remember sitting there with goosebumps going all down my back and down my arms, and it's just, and when they did the stare down where they kind of looked to the crowd, then looked back to each other, just perfect timing, and the crowd couldn't have responded better. The flash bulbs are going crazy. How cool would it be to be one of those people in the crowd that was creating those flash bulbs, and to have an actual photo from being there, like. And that's one of the things I miss about Raw back then to Raw now, is all the flash bulbs going off when moments, stare downs in the rings, or when guys that get up on the ropes. It's like one of the things that sucks about technology getting better. But that moment, Hogan and The Rock, that's what we were looking for when WWF bought WCW. That's what everyone wanted with the Invasion. And even though we didn't get it then, it's at least they came around and gave it to us at this time, and it was still a great moment and led to one of the greatest WrestleMania matches in history. So definitely deserves its place up on the list. Moving on to the debut of Brock Lesnar back in I think it was 2002. Oh man, like, everybody had heard the buzz about this big, jacked up, beast of a wrestler that could do a shooting star press, and he was stronger than anyone. It was just, and he had the physique that was just made him a monster, and Brock Lesnar had tons of hype, and it takes a special kind of person to be able to live up to all that hype. Not only live up to it, but exceeded it. When Brock first showed up, and it's like, you see this specimen. They weren't exaggerating. He is exactly what everyone described. And, he's just throwing these guys, like grown men, around like they're little stuffed animals. And it was just, and, that just kept going after the first night. And then you see, got into matches with Kurt Angle and stuff. You could see this guy could actually really wrestle. And so, the debut of Brock Lesnar was a pretty big moment. It stuck out in my mind because I remember all the hype about this, this big young prospect. And he came up and delivered on absolutely everything they talked about. So, moment that stood out to me for sure. Then a small little moment that always stood out to me, I thought was hilarious. There used to be lots of "you screwed Brett" chants, especially before he came back and everything. But there used to be always lots, you know, anytime Shawn Michaels or Vince or Earl Hebner would come to a part of the world where Bret Hart was really popular, you'd always get the "You Screwed Bret" chants. And one night on Raw, the fans were giving it to Vince, and "You Screwed Bret" chants were getting louder and louder, and Vince was trying to ignore it and cut his promo, but they were getting louder and louder. And finally, he just got frustrated and fed up and said, "You're damn right I didn't. I do it again." Oh man, one of the funniest moments for Raw and Rock to me. I thought that was so funny, and just every time I think about it, it makes me laugh. So, had to mention it. And then kind of staying in the same with same thing to do with the Bret screw job, Shawn Michaels' ultimate troll job to the Montreal crowd. It's like, oh man, you little bastard. Like, we had been, you know, one of the things people had been looking forward to was, you know, that big initial pop when Bret's music finally hit. Again, he came out in the WWF, and, you know, it's like everyone's waiting for that moment, and then Shawn Michaels wastes it and ruins it by trolling us. Like, beautiful, beautiful heel move, and, you know, even though it sucks to waste that moment, we ended up getting that moment anyways. But it was just, you know, if you appreciate wrestling, you appreciate that moment, and that was perfectly done by Shawn Michaels. And then I got to admit, I got into a point in my life from about 2006 to 2010 where I just wasn't able to watch Raw as much for a variety of different reasons. I was living away from home. On my own, and my parents were in a different city, so there was definitely no safety net to fall back on. And, you know, I realized, and I learned pretty quickly living on your own, that cable is not exactly always easy to pay for, and it definitely sucks to keep paying for it. So, you know, I'd get into situations where, you know, I didn't really have cable, or I'd get into situations where I was living in a place nobody liked wrestling but me, and no one would let me watch it on TV. So just for different reasons, I had to stop watching it. But you know, to be honest, there wasn't really much that was making me miss it. It wasn't really. I always read the results and follow along, but there wasn't anything I was seeing that was making me say, like, you know, I have to watch this. I got to watch Raw. And I was really fed up after the Ruthless Aggression era. I mean, coming out of the Attitude Era, WWF buys WCW, expectations couldn't have been higher, and that was just a crushing disappointment. And then the Ruthless Aggression era, it's like, in the Attitude Era, we were loving the storyline content, but everybody was really kind of wanting better matches, longer matches. The Crash TV was starting to get on people's nerves. I definitely remember that. Then we moved to the Ruthless Aggression era, to where, you know, the matches started getting longer and better, but the storylines just ended up getting absolute garbage. Like, I mean, you had Katie. I don't want to go through all the bad stuff, you know, Katie Vick and the "It's Not My Fault" Snitsky, and and they had all the talent in the world to do the best stuff, but they just put out the worst kind of storylines, and I was just absolutely done. I was just fed up being frustrated every week, and combined with not being able to watch, unfortunately, I just kind of wasn't able to see much of Raw between 2006 and 2010, so not going to really be talking about much of those matches or moments because it just wasn't there for them. So moving on to one of the biggest ones after I started watching again, the debut of the Nexus. That was just a crazy, surreal, awesome moment, because NXT was just starting to try and build itself into something legitimate, you know, from the joke that it was with the reality show they made it. And, you know, everybody knew that there were going to be some prospects coming up, but man, no one expected this mass, you know, everybody at the same time, you know, attacking John Cena, destroying the whole set. Like, that was a great moment, and, you know, it really kind of made people think bigger things were coming for Nexus, and a lot more would happen with that. But, you know, that story has been told a lot. We know why that didn't work. But at the time, this was a huge moment, and really one of the first big, huge moments we'd had on Raw in a long time. So, you know, this one stands out. Even though it didn't go where everyone, I think, hoped it would, this still stands as a great moment in time. A couple other ones from the recent era of Raw. Miz cashing in his Money in the Bank contract. Definitely a shocking moment. Even though all the Money in the Bank winners had successfully cashed into that point, I think everyone thought that they were giving the Miz the Money in the Bank to let him be the first guy to cash in and not win. So, and I mean, even on this time at Raw, I think it was in late November, and it wasn't I don't remember it being a significant Raw or anything. So when Miz came down, it was kind of a surprise, and then they actually had a decent little match. But sure enough, Miz hit the skull crushing finale and won the title, and it is a great moment. No matter how you feel about the Miz, yeah, you got to respect him. But I mean, even if you don't, it's wrong that you don't. But if you don't respect him, you have to give him the credit. This was a great moment, and he earned it around this time. He had stepped up his game in the ring. He was nobody could. I mean, arguably he's right up there with CM Punk on the microphone at that time, and I just you could probably argue that maybe CM Punk should have got the opportunity to main event against John Cena, but you can't argue that Miz didn't deserve it. Like, both of those guys would have been in the conversation, and Miz deserved it, and he delivered with his opportunity. So, you got to give him the credit that he deserves. Another great cash-in moment, Dolph Ziggler kind of falls in with the Nexus that, thought it was going to lead to a lot bigger and better things. Ended up being disappointed for, different reasons. But at this moment, oh man, one of the greatest moments in the history of, WWE. Because, Ziggler was one of those guys that, worked himself up from kind of a bad gimmick all the way up and really started establishing himself as a guy that could work in the ring, to a guy that could actually carry the world title if they gave him a chance. And he didn't really know if he was going to get the chance, and you thought that he might be the guy that they're going to make cash in the briefcase and not win. But sure enough, the night, and no better way to do it, night after WrestleMania. It's just everybody's on a high from the WrestleMania night before, and it's all the best, loudest, rowdiest fans inside an arena. So it's just a great atmosphere, and just one of the best moments in all of WWE. It's a real feel-good moment, and one that Dolph Ziggler definitely deserved. Moving to another one. One that's probably one of the moments that probably should be on my top 20, but I think I just couldn't fit it on there. Occupy Raw with Daniel Bryan. One of the greatest moments. It was a huge. It was awesome to see. Have really helped him. It was the moment that got him into the main event of WrestleMania, but I just think there was a few other moments around that time that I think were deserved a little bit higher place on the list. But that moment was really awesome, and it was such a relief to see that they were gonna listen to the fans and go with Daniel Bryan and give him a shot. It was just, that moment was just kind of like fuck, thank you, finally. So that was definitely a great moment in Raw history. Another one that people would probably think should be on my top 20, but it just couldn't put it on there for me. CM Punk's Pipe Bomb promo. One of the greatest promos in the history of wrestling for sure. At the time, it was sorely needed. Basically saying everything that fans were saying at the time. And, they weren't letting guys go out there with a microphone and say those kinds of things. And so, this was a promo that you had to see. Even if you didn't watch it, you were telling people, no, you got to check this promo out. It was awesome. And just couldn't have been delivered better. CM Punk hit on every point that he needed to hit, and it was one of the greatest moments in the history of Raw for sure. It's just too bad that CM Punk would end up leaving a few years later and still hasn't returned to this day. But it's definitely one of his greatest moments and one of the greatest moments on Raw for sure. One of the most surprising and moment I did not see coming: Shane McMahon's return before WrestleMania 32. Everyone always wanted Shane O'Mac to return, and he was always a name everyone would bring up when they were talking about guys that were returned. But just one of those things that you kind of never thought maybe never happened. And but sure enough, he came back, got a massive, insane reaction, the one that he deserved, and it was just a great moment that really kind of helped save WrestleMania 32, because with all the injuries and just some of the lackluster storylines, there wasn't a lot to be excited about heading into that show. But the return of Shane McMahon and getting to announcing that it's going to be Hell in the Cell with The Undertaker doesn't get any bigger than that. So that was a really awesome moment. The return of Brock Lesnar too, and when he came back to confront John Cena, that was an awesome moment. Brock is another one of those guys you might thought never come back. Because he had a great run in the UFC and made a lot of money, and it had been known that some of the things about the wrestling business he wasn't a huge fan of. So, you never know. He might be okay just sitting on his pile of money and sitting at his farm. But No, thankfully he came back and got a great reaction, just a great moment for the night after WrestleMania. Inexplicably lost to John Cena the next month, but still ended up going on a great run, and his return was a really great start to that. Oh man, one of the moments that I struggled with putting on the top 20, but I just in the end I just couldn't do it. But Mark Henry's fake retirement. How great is that? That moment almost like transcends any list and just needs to stand out there on its own because it was so great and so unexpected. Nobody saw Mark Henry retiring coming. It's like, oh man. But then you just kind of you accept it. You're right along with them. The tears are welling up, and it's like right. You're ready to celebrate his career, and John Cena's coming out to give him his respect and let him hold the title and raise his arm, and then that's what I do, bam! Oh man, what a great swerve! Nobody saw it coming. What a great moment! What a performance by Mark Henry! It just that's thinking about all that. I'm like, I got to put it on my top 20, but it's just, to me, it's a moment that, it's such a great moment that it stands out on its own, and it was just unexpected, and it's just a great gift of a moment. You'd never, it's something that you would, you never really request, but when you get it, it's like, man, how could I live without a fake Mark Henry retirement on John Cena? Just an unbelievable moment. And then another one I had trouble keeping off the top 20, but the Festival of Friendship. Man, the run of KO and Chris Jericho was just great, and it needed something special to put a cap on it. That run was too good for it just to be a random breakup or for them to just go their separate ways. It needed something special, and the Festival of Friendship delivered that. So Chris's stupid gifts were just hilarious, and Kevin Owens trying to awkwardly accept them, but really giving him, putting him to task for giving him these stupid things. And then finally you bastard Kevin. How come my name's on it? It was just perfectly executed by Chris Jericho, and the inflection he puts on his voice there is just it's almost like an innocent little kid. How come my name's on it? I was like, just perfect, beautiful. I think it's too bad the match at WrestleMania to blow off the feud was a little bit disappointing, but I think I was really hurt by the outcome being everyone knew Kevin Owens was winning that match, so I think that was really hurt it. But the Festival of Friendship stands there as one of the greatest moments in Raw, and one of the greatest moments for Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho, which is saying something with how many moments Chris Jericho has had on Raw. Gotta mention all the stuff for the Hardcore Championship 24/7, especially with the Stooges. Everything with the Stooges, even before with the stuff with Vince when they were feuding with Steve Austin. The Stooges were great, man. I was disappointed when their run ended. They were so fun to watch and so entertaining that I just wanted them to keep watching them forever. They were awesome, but especially when they were, excuse me, when they were going after the Hardcore title, and when Briscoe wins it, and they're doing the whisper, I thought that was hilarious. And just really loved all the stuff. Crash Holly, rest in peace. He was always one of my favorites, and I loved his run with the Hardcore titles. The 24/7 rule really made put some fun elements to Raw during the days of the Attitude Era. Talk about another moment that we thought we would never see. Bret Hart returning to Raw after hadn't been back since the screw job, and with everything that had gone on, it's just, I think most people's monies would have been on Bret never coming back, and if he did come back, he certainly wasn't going to share the ring with Shawn Michaels and bury the hatchet and everything, but that's exactly what they did, and it was so awesome to see, and it was just a great moment for me as a fan, because I was always a big fan of both Bret and Shawn. I never wanted to see them, hate each other. I always was, very disappointed at the bitterness and the hate, just all the negativity between them. And, I really just wanted them to be best of friends and to be, to give each other the respect that they both deserve as two of the greatest wrestlers, performers, two of the greatest anything in the history of the wrestling business. So this moment really meant a lot to me, to see Bret back and to see Bret and Shawn finally bury the hatchet and move forward. It was just a great moment that I was really, really grateful that we were able to get. another one I have to mention, a historic moment, not just for Raw, but for women everywhere. When Trish and Lita main evented Raw for the first women's match to ever main event a WWE show, and they delivered with just an awesome, epic match. Lita almost match was almost cut short. Lita dived to the outside and took a nasty fall, but gutted through it, and just continued the match, and delivered one of the greatest women's matches of all time. And for a first time ever main event, this is the match they needed to deliver, and they hit a home run, and this is something that they can hang their hats on, and this is something they can really feel good about, I think, for the rest of their careers, because this is a moment in time that will stand out, and I don't think its importance will ever kind of go away. Moving to another moment that kind of doesn't get, I don't think you can really understand how big the moment was unless you were around during that time, but the debut of Cactus Jack on Raw. It was kind of known around wrestling that Cactus Jack will never be on Raw. Vince McMahon will never let that character on Raw. He's too extreme. He's too violent. Vince just doesn't like it. Everyone just said you'll never see Cactus Jack on Raw. And but Cactus Jack had been built up as almost this mythical figure. Like when you saw it was like almost like a John Wayne. Like when Cactus Jack would come dragging the barbed wire bat, it's like you knew something was going down. And so when Cactus Jack finally showed up on Raw, it was just like it was just exciting. Like holy shit, we were gonna get Cactus Jack. And so it was for fans around that time, I think that was a really significant moment that might not seem as significant now with everything, with the environment that wrestling is in, but back then that was a pretty significant moment, especially for me. I want to talk about the real Hijack Raw. Now the one that they talk about, Hijack Raw, is the one where during the championship ceremony in the ring, everyone started chanting Daniel Bryan and just would not stop. That is what WWE calls the Hijack Raw, but the real Hijack Raw was one, like I said, I forgot to write dates down, but it was heading into before WrestleMania 30, it was in Chicago, and on the fans on the internet had just kind of got a movement together to say that we're gonna hijack this show. Everybody going is gonna hijack the show. We're gonna chant, boo and cheer at certain things to send a message. We're gonna chant certain things to send a message. We're gonna react to certain things in a certain way to send a message. It was just a big movement that got together. It got WWE's attention, and all the reports said they changed the show, and they wrote the show to combat this Hijack Raw movement. They put two fan favorites together in a match, so there wasn't really anyone to boo, and they didn't do any controversial storylines to get fans all riled up. So it was like they say, a lot of people after that Hijack Raw ended said that the movement was a failure and that nothing worked and stuff, but they changed the show to combat the movement. Daniel Bryan got into the main event of WrestleMania 30, so you know what? It was a 100% complete victory. That Hijack Raw from Chicago was a victory for the fans, and that was one of the moments that showed Vince and Triple H and all the decision makers that were that this Daniel Bryan guy is legit. Fans are legit going to support him, and we're not going away. And this is not going away. So I really feel like this moment was one that showed that this is a real movement. It's not just, cheering in an arena. This is something that people actually believe in. So definitely one of the biggest moments for me. One moment that probably should be on the top 20 that I just couldn't put it on there, but the Raw and Nitro simulcast. And a historic moment, not just for wrestling, but TV. You're talking about being live on two competing networks at the same time. I don't think that can be understated at all. And then you're talking about airing live on the two biggest competing wrestling shows in history. So that moment was one of the biggest, most historic moments in not only the wrestling business, not only in wrestling history, but in television history as well. Because we're talking that is a huge, huge deal to be on the same feed on two competing networks. And then Shane McMahon's big swerve, and it was just when we heard Shane McMahon is going to buy WCW and Vince would run WWF, it's like so much excitement, because it's like now I think they really made a mistake in not splitting up, like just letting Shane, you have WCW, here's your budget, rock and roll. And because, you know, like now WCW had a Vince McMahon owner. It didn't have a billionaire, didn't have some faceless corporation. It had an actual, you know, person that people could get behind and they could, you know, build a relationship with, and they could want to succeed for Shane McMahon. And, you know, they would want to put their bodies on the line for Shane McMahon, and they'd go out there and work a little harder and faster and better. So, you know, this moment, I think, goes with the Nexus, and that, you know, it was something that people thought was going to be a lot bigger and better, but, you know, ended up kind of being disappointing. But the historicness of that moment can't be understated. Like, it was one of the biggest moments ever on wrestling and in TV, for sure. And then the Radicals, the night the Radicals showed up and were sitting ringside at Raw. To me, that was the moment WCW lost the war. I was never ever worried about WWF losing after that. To me, losing those 4 caliber of talents all at the same time, and not only losing them, but knowing that, you know, WCW, in trying to improve their product, wasn't going to have these guys to be able to do it. I mean, I'm sure everyone thinking like about what WCW could do to get themselves back into contention for number 1. You know, all the ideas probably, I'm sure, involved at least one of the 4 guys, if not all 4. So losing all those 4 talents, giving those talents to the competitor, and not having those talents around to help you get better, that's it. That's over. And to me, that was the moment that ended WCW, the competition between WWF and WCW. And it wasn't shortly after that the WCW had to fold. So that moment was really significant for me. Last thing I'll talk about before I get into the top 20. I know I've gone really long, but was the one of the matches that people point to as the greatest match in the history of Raw. Triple H and Steve Austin versus Chris Benoit and Chris Jericho. Just sucks that Triple H had to tear his quad, because, man, leading up to it, this is one of the most incredible matches in not only on Raw, but in the history of the wrestling business. It was, you know, the heat from the crowd is incredible. 4 of the best wrestlers in the history of the business in there, and they just delivered an incredible match. And even though Triple H did tear his quad, you know, gutted it out somehow and finished the match, and, you know, like, and to help the match. If the match had to be stopped due to injury, you know, wouldn't be remembered as fondly. But because Triple H is able to gut it out and finish it, it's, you know, it deserves its place up there as one of the greatest matches in the history of Raw. So that goes through, talks about all the rest of the matches and moments. I'll get into my top 20 here. I'm gonna save my number 1 match and my number 1 moment for the end. Gonna go through the other 18 just randomly. So here we go. My top 20 moments for the history of Raw. I'm going to start with Pillman's Got a Gun. Oh, man. As a kid, to me, this was just like, it just blew my mind away as a teenager. Because, you know, like, it was just so intense, and it was just so real to me that I just had, you know, he had that nervousness for, I was hoping, I didn't want anyone to get shot. I didn't want anyone to get hurt. You know, I was a huge Brian Pillman fan. You know, I wasn't really a big Steve Austin fan, but, you know, like, to me, this moment it was one of those moments you're watching where you're just hoping everything is okay, and you're hoping nothing bad happens, and you're on the edge of your seat. And, you know, to me, I couldn't find enough information about this angle. Like, when it ended after Raw, I was going out of my mind as a kid, you know, pacing around, just like, you know, is Pillman okay? Is Austin okay? Like, what happened? Are the cops going to be there? Like, it's just, in this moment, I mean, even though it's very controversial and some people look down on it, this is one of the moments that helped establish Raw, coming out of some of the tougher years. It's helped establish it as a must-see show, a show where anything could happen, a show that you had to get your eyes on every week. And this is one of the most significant moments on Raw for me, for sure. The next one, his name is Eric Bischoff. Wow, man. Talk about a moment you never thought you'd see. I don't think anybody anywhere would have ever predicted that Eric Bischoff would be working for Vince McMahon. And and hugging, sharing a hug, you know, raising each other's arms. One of the most surreal, unbelievable moments in the history of wrestling, especially after what Eric Bischoff had done during his war with WWF. Like, just the things that have been said and done, you just never thought that it would ever happen, especially this soon. Like, it wasn't very long after WCW closed that Eric Bischoff was brought in. And says, I was working at a call center at the time, and in the cafeteria where everyone ate lunch, they had TVs in the corners, and in one of the corners there was about 50 people surrounding the TV. And I remember somebody coming up to see and walking away disgusted, almost mad that they wasted their time, thinking, I thought this was another 9/11. Like, this is just wrestling. But it was so significant that it had everybody that was free standing around the TV in absolute shock that Vince McMahon had brought out Eric Bischoff, and now he was performing for WWF. Like, just one of the most unbelievable moments that you could ever see. And it ended up being an awesome run, and very, very glad it happened, but just couldn't believe it at the time. Moving on, so now I'll get into a lot of the original DX moments. Original DX was it had a huge impact on me as a teenager. It really helped kind of wake me up out of my innocence and give me a little bit of an edge and a little bit of a backbone and stuff like that. So one of my favorite moments, this moment doesn't get mentioned a lot, but it's one of my favorites, always stuck with me, was when after the Undertaker had been in the casket and Kane set it on fire. Raw, I think Raw started, and it looked like the Undertaker was coming down from the roof, so everyone's like, okay, he's good, and then raised his arms, and all of a sudden the DX music hit, and it was Shawn Michaels, and he was dressed as the Undertaker, and oh man, I just loved how much of a dick move that was, and just how it was so awesome. I just loved every single second of that, and it doesn't get mentioned a lot. I think that's a really unsung moment in the history of Raw, and the history of DX for sure. The DX election speech, holy crap, man! As a kid, I just could not believe this was a real produced segment. Like when I saw it, I just couldn't believe that this was something that it actually showed on Raw and that was produced by them, and that was like, this is something that was supposed to be put out there. It just, to me, it was so edgy and so far over the line that I just stunned. But I loved it as a kid. I thought it was hilarious, and like I say, it was one of those things that woke up the backbone in me and the attitude. Another DX moment I love was when he was feuding with Ken Shamrock, leading to their match, and he was just being his stupid, arrogant self, and he was sitting on the stage in a wheelchair, and he had his foot out, and he's saying that he was going to do some training to try and deal with the ankle lock, and so Triple H starts twisting his foot, and he's pretending like it really hurts, and it's obviously a rubber foot. But just stuff like that. It was just such a dick move that it was just, you just had to appreciate it, and those were the things I really loved about DX. This Mike Tyson swerve when he joined DX. Everything about Mike Tyson in the WWF in 1990 or around that time was just loved it. I mean, the confrontation with Austin was one of the craziest, intense things that's ever happened. And then and now he's in the ring about to get physical with Shawn Michaels, and then boom, DX shirt, and just excuse me, one of the best swerves in wrestling, one of the greatest moments. Excuse me. For DX and on Raw and everything, and just it was it's so awesome to see how happy Mike Tyson is, and the pure joy that is, you can see flowing through Mike Tyson in that moment. Like, he's so happy to be there. He's so happy to be part of it. He's so happy to be part of like an angle like that. It's just so awesome to see, and it's you find yourself getting just as happy for him. It's just a great moment for me to see. I always love watching it. And then can't really narrow it down to a moment, but the entire run of the 1997 Hart Foundation, that was such an important run in developing me as a teenager and the person I'd become. That developed. There's another thing. It helped develop the backbone. Helped me give me an attitude. Helped me lose some of my innocence. It helped me, made me want to stand up for something. It made me want to, fight for something that's right, and for something that just made me want to, to make a positive contribution, and just made me want to stand up and defend what is right. And that's what the Hart Foundation, you know, they were doing. They were defending the goodness in wrestling, and all the fans were turning on the good guys and cheering the bad guys. And the Hart Foundation were going to be those, you know, that group was going to fight through it, and they weren't going to, you know, they were going to stand tall. That was just such an important time for me, you know, being a Canadian teenager, and it just had so many great moments, like all the interviews and all the matches and just everything, going from being mercilessly booed in the U.S. to being cheered like heroes in Canada. And it was just, and those Raws were so much fun. I mean, so much fun to watch, so entertaining with how the crowd energy was and just the back and forth. It was just such a great time, and that whole period, I can't narrow it down to one moment. That whole period meant so much to me, and I just thought it was so great. And I really feel it was one of the most important things that helped WWF survive 1997 and fight back and get the victory back from WCW. And then the moment that led to the Hart Foundation, Bret absolutely losing his shit at the end of Raw on Vince McMahon, and that moment is a red letter day for me. That kind of made me sit up, and that was one of my Santa Claus is not real moments that made me, you know, transitioned me from a little kid into, you know, a young adult and eventually into a man, because, you know, Bret Hart standing up for what he believed. And, you know, to me, Bret Hart was completely justified in that promo. He was right. He was being screwed left, right, and center. Nobody cared. Nobody was doing anything. And it was the opposite. Everyone acting like Bret was being ridiculous and should just forget about it. And I was feeling the same thing Bret was. And when he just vented that out, it vented it out for me. And I was all in with Bret and the Hart Foundation. And, you know, just that moment to me still, and I just recently watched it, and just still cuts like it did at that time, and it's still as great of a moment. And because of the, you know, the content of Bret's tirade, it doesn't get replayed as much as it should or probably could. But man, like, it is one of the best moments in the history of Raw, and really one of those unsung moments that started and kick-started the Attitude Era. So. Moving on to a moment that because of my, you know, big allegiance to Bret and the Hart Foundation, I hated Stone Cold Steve Austin's guts. Like everybody else, when, you know, while he was being built up into this, you know, the biggest star in the history of wrestling, I hated his guts. Couldn't stand him. I was not cheering him. I did not like him. I didn't want to see him win. It took me a little while to come around, and I did not come around until he had that match on Raw where he faced Kane the night after he lost the title in the First Blood match. I did not want to see Kane be the WWF champion. I was starting to get a little more into Stone Cold at the time, and he had just won the title, so I wanted him to have a good run. So, you know, I was really disappointed that, you know, he lost the title, and so for that match, you know, I was cheering for Austin 100%, and it was just such a great atmosphere in the crowd, and it was right at the end of the school year, so I had all my buddies over, and, you know, that didn't happen too often, so it was just full house of me and all my buddies, and, you know, we're all cheering for Austin in the crowd. It created a great atmosphere, and, you know, it was a great match, and Austin, you know, great moment. Austin wins. It's just great. It was just a moment that really meant a lot to me, because a lot of happiness, a lot of positive energy from that moment, and that was the moment that made me a Stone Cold fan. From then on, I was like, okay, here we go. Like, I'm ready to cheer for Stone Cold now. So that moment meant a lot to me. Probably my favorite Steve Austin moment. You know, I talked about a few of them before, but one of my favorites is the Zamboni. And that moment, it was just so chaotic, so beautifully chaotic. It's just my favorite. Like, Austin driving the Zamboni through the backstage. Zamboni's not a normal kind of vehicle you'd be driving, so to see that is already kind of crazy enough of a visual. He goes through, he comes out in the Zamboni and really knocks the ring back a few feet, and the crowd is going absolutely apeshit. He jumps on top, runs along the top, jumps over all the cops and security, hammers Vince McMahon a clothesline, gets on top, starts feeding him shots. Crowd is absolutely going insane. Jerry Lawler and JR have a perfect call, and it's just one of my favorite moments. Is Mr. McMahon all right? JR, is Mr. McMahon all right? Just one of the best moments. The perfect storm of a moment. Beautiful chaos. That's probably my favorite Stone Cold Steve Austin moment. Close second was the Mike Tyson Steve Austin confrontation, and this to me is the we talk about biggest moments, red letter moments, establishing moments. This is the one. This is the moment that turned Steve Austin into the biggest mainstream star that he would become, because Mike Tyson at the time was a legit bad. He legitimately was the baddest man on the planet. Nobody would have argued that. And for Steve Austin to go toe to toe with him, stick the middle fingers right in his face, Tyson actually put his hands on him, and so going forward, if you're a Steve Austin fan and wearing a Steve Austin shirt or talking about him, if anybody challenges you on that, you can just say, "Man, this guy went toe to toe with Mike Tyson. Like, who are you talking about? Austin would kick your ass. He kicked Tyson's ass too." And so they met and that seemed like a real moment. It didn't seem like something was set up. So people thought that was real, and people thought Steve Austin was legitimately went toe-to-toe with Mike Tyson and lived to tell about it. So that established Steve Austin as the legit badass, somebody you could put your support behind, and it was just, that moment to me made Steve Austin, because it was an established, mainstream, real person, Mike Tyson, coming into the WWF and using his influence to establish Steve Austin. So to me, this is one of the most important moments in the history of not only Raw, but WWF and just wrestling history. It was just a great moment, and you can rewatch it back now and just get as into it now as you were then. Just a great moment. Now I'll talk about 3 Chris Jericho moments. He's definitely a huge part of the history of Raw. Start right away with his debut. Probably easily the greatest debut in the history of the wrestling business. I started becoming a fan of Chris Jericho in WCW, and he had actually been one of those guys that had kind of moved into a mainstream. Like, everyone knew about WCW Chris Jericho, and his comedy was stuff that people appreciated, so everyone was kind of had their eye on him to see what he was going to be doing next. And when the rumors on the internet said he was done from WCW and coming to WWF, everyone was thinking that this Millennium Clock was Chris Jericho. I remember sitting on my buddy's couch, and we were ready for that night. Like, this is it, Jericho tonight. And when that Millennium Clock hit in the Rock's promo, like, it's like, holy shit, maybe it's not Jericho. Like, because Jericho hadn't been put up to that level in WCW, so you didn't really think he was going to immediately walk in there in WWF. But sure enough, when that Jericho flipped over, it had the same reaction as the Chicago crowd. Just, yeah. And, Jericho, he started out cutting a great promo, but I remember being hugely disappointed at him, basically looking like he was going to cry at the end. And I remember thinking that made him look really weak and just kind of put a downer on the whole thing. But even with having a little downer moment, still the best debut of all time, still one of the greatest moments of Raw history. And you can watch it back, and you still get that little bit of goosebumps and butterflies when the Jericho flips around, the crowd goes insane. And it's just one of those moments you'll never forget where you were when you saw it. And then another one of the biggest moments when Jericho won the WWF title from Triple H. This moment was a huge missed opportunity to me. This is the one and only moment that I ever picked up the phone and called one of my friends to tell them did you just see what happened? You need to watch Raw right now. Like, I'd never picked up the phone and called somebody, but when Jericho won, Chris Jericho just beat Triple H and won the WWF title. Triple H was dominant around this time, so you'd never ever thought he was losing the title to Jericho, especially on a Raw. But man, when that happened, it was the first and only phone call moment for me, and it was, watching it back today, you can still get those excitement and goosebumps, and it's just one of the greatest moments. It was a really fun match to watch, and it's too bad they didn't kind of just extend it a week and have a rematch the next week. And the title had to go back to Triple H, but I think they could have extended that a little bit and got a little bit more out of that moment, because it was absolutely incredible. And then one moment's on my top 20 that I'm guaranteed is almost nobody else's, but the musical chairs. I was there for that. That was in Winnipeg. And so that moment has a special place for me. We got to give Chris Jericho, the hometown boy, one of the biggest ovations that anyone's ever got on Raw. Like, watching it back, the crowd was insanely hot. And it was just it's fun to watch it back, and even for something that could have been one of the stupidest, most ridiculous segments in the history of Raw, it ended up being pretty fun. It was, Ric Flair was at his best, outperforming, and everybody did a great job with their roles in that. It just ended up being one of those fun segments you wouldn't think is good, but it turned out really good. And and Chris Jericho got an amazing reaction, so it definitely has a special place on my list. An incredible reaction. Hulk Hogan the night after WrestleMania in Montreal. Man, what would it be like to be Hulk Hogan in that moment, standing in front of thousands of people as they are just yelling at the top of their lungs in appreciation of you. You can't even get a word out. They're so loud and it's so long and they just won't stop. Like that moment. I really hope Hulk Hogan appreciates what he got in that moment, because there are very few people that get to experience something like that, and it's just, as being a lifelong Hulkamaniac and a huge fan, I was so happy to have Hogan back, and I was so happy to have an opportunity to cheer him, and it was just, I really felt he deserved this ovation. It really meant a lot to me to see WWF fans be able to give him this moment and ovation. Another random little moment from Raw, from when they did the Gold Rush tournament on Raw in, I believe, 2005. One of probably the best super kick ever. Shawn Michaels, Sweet Chin Music, absolutely destroyed Shelton Benjamin springboarding across the ring. It just shows why Shawn Michaels is one of the best of all time. Like you can't do that move, and it's almost like you can't do that move and not kill someone, because it's like you have to put the absolute perfect amount of strength into your foot when you're lifting it up, and you just can't give too much force in that, or else you're gonna kill the guy. So you got to that move has to be performed by an absolute professional, and it was in that moment, and it created one of my favorite moments. Shelton Benjamin got absolutely crushed. And then so the last two moments before I move into to my number one match and number one moment. Talk about what WWE calls Hijack Raw, the Daniel Bryan chant in Seattle. It's man, that is such a great moment, because it wasn't supposed to happen. WWE did not want those chants to be going on at that time. They wanted the entire focus to be on John Cena and Randy Orton. They did not want to be pushing Daniel Bryan to the main event. They did not want people focusing on Daniel Bryan, but that's exactly what they did. The entire segment is just chanting Daniel Bryan, and just wouldn't stop. And it was just so awesome to see, because at the time we were trying to support Daniel Bryan, trying to push him into the main event. They just would refuse. They just wouldn't listen to the fans. And then in this moment, to hear that everyone in Seattle stand up and say, no, you know what, we've had enough. We're not shutting up. We're not going away. You're going to push Daniel Bryan whether you like it or not. And it's just one of the greatest moments of all time. One Daniel Bryan definitely deserved, and one I go back and watch all the time, because it was just such a significant, impactful moment, and it really meant a lot, and to me, as a big Daniel Bryan fan. And last moment before we get into the last two, the breakup of the Shield. The Shield had a lot of run left in them, and there were some teams being built up, like they still hadn't done everything they could with the Wyatts, and even though Batista was leaving, there was still some stuff with Evolution to do, and there was just a lot more I think they could have done with the Shield, and I think everyone was expecting them to keep doing a lot more, but man, like when you do a breakup or a turn like that, you got to do it where it's a surprise. You got to do it where people aren't expecting it. You have to do it when people still want more, and that's when it works the best, and that's exactly what they did. Nobody saw it coming, Seth Rollins turning on Reigns and Ambrose, but it was such a perfectly executed turn. Didn't see it coming, and it elevated every single guy coming out of it. And that's one of the things how you can judge a successful turn or an angle like that, is if everybody gets elevated coming out of it, you did the right thing, and that was the time to do it. And you can Seth Rollins elevated, Roman Reigns elevated, Ambrose elevated. So, even though there was a run left for the Shield and maybe could have kept it going, that was the right time to do it. and it stands as a shocking, great moment in Raw history, and it stands as a great moment in all three of their careers, the Shield's careers. So it's definitely deserves its place on the list, I feel. And now we've gone very, very long. Thanks for staying on the ride with me. Gonna talk about the last two. Talk about what to me is the number one match in Raw history. Mankind versus The Rock for the WWF title, the night the channels changed. To me, this match just has all of the elements. It's just all the elements of the Attitude Era. It has all the elements of a perfect match and story. Just absolutely everything. To me, this match is the perfect storm, and that's why it is the greatest match in the history of Raw. You have basically all the biggest players of the Attitude Era are involved in this match. Mankind, Rock, Austin, Vince McMahon, DX. This is all the corporation, all the biggest pieces of the Attitude Era play a part in this match. The crowd is going absolutely ape shit insane. You got chaos at the end of it. You got the start of the night when WCW says, "Hey everyone, Cactus Jack, Mick Foley's going to win the WWF title," and 800,000 people wanted to see that and turn the channel from Nitro to Raw, forever changing the landscape of the Monday Night War. And then you got the surprise of Steve Austin. The reason why that pop was so big is people didn't think Austin would be there. He was hurt, wasn't expected to be there at the time, but bam, shows up, evens the playing field, puts Mankind on The Rock, and Mankind, after everybody knew his story, everybody knew the struggle and the climb that he had gone through to get to the biggest stage on the WWF, and nobody thought he'd ever win the WWF title. I mean, and then for that moment to actually happen, it's a feel-good moment. There's joy, happiness. There's just, it's everything. Like I say, that is a perfect storm moment. Everything came together. All the elements came together to create a perfect moment. And it did. Not only did all the elements come together, but you got the business part of it. You put the asses in seats. The ratings were huge. The attendance coming out of the show was huge. So it's everything, all the factors that you need to have to create a good wrestling match or a good wrestling angle were involved in this. So I really feel like this is the absolute pinnacle of wrestling storylines and wrestling matches and just everything all the energy that you put into creating wrestling. This is the pinnacle of it. And I really feel like this match stands out as the greatest match in Raw history for sure. And last but not least, for me, the number one moment in Raw history was when Daniel Bryan turned on the Wyatt family. And I really, this moment probably, if it was up to me, this moment never would have happened because I never would have had him join the Wyatt family. I thought that was ridiculous at the time, but it ended up creating the greatest moment in Raw history to me. And when Daniel Bryan, turns on Bray Wyatt and slams him into the cage and gets into the corner. When he gets in the corner and starts doing the yes chant and the crowd does it with him in perfect synchronization, that to me you've never ever seen anything like that in wrestling before. You've never seen a moment where absolutely every person in the crowd is following along perfectly with a performer. Like everybody in that arena is doing the yes right in perfect synchronization with Daniel Bryan. And that moment was so significant. I got a copy of it and showed it to my mom and dad I felt they had to see this. My mom couldn't be less impressed by wrestling, not a fan, but even she was like, even she was, the only thing she said was, "Wow, you never seen anything like that before." My dad, same thing. He's like, "You've never seen anything like that." And it was just, to me, that was such a significant moment that I just, I couldn't understand at the time how you'd watch that moment and not completely 100% get behind Daniel Bryan and push him to the moon, because it's like that's the thing. What you want your big babyface character to do is to get everybody in the arena supporting him and following along with him. And that's exactly what Daniel Bryan is. It's hard to do things in wrestling that have never been done before, but Daniel Bryan managed to do it, and this moment I feel helped propel him to the main event and convince everybody that Daniel Bryan needed to be in the main event, and it was the right thing to do. And just, to me, this is the greatest moment in Raw history because you've never seen anything like it before, and you probably never will again. And it led to, it led to the fans being able to contribute and say, you know what, no, like this was what needs to happen. Just you got to listen to us this time. And thankfully, even though it's not what Vince wanted to do, he still decided in the end to listen to the fans and give us what we wanted. And I think he did. I think he got justified on his end. There was WrestleMania 30 did big business, and it's a moment that holds up in time. So to me, that's the greatest moment in the history of Raw, and it just really meant a lot to me. So that'll do it. I've gone very, very long, but like I said, I love talking about wrestling, and getting into this. There was lots of matches and moments in the 25 years that I felt I needed to address, and I know I missed some, but like LL Cool J once said, blame the head, not the heart. I tried to rack my brain as much as I could to think of everything, but if I missed something, I apologize. But I think I covered most and gave everyone a good kind of tune-up heading into tonight's show. Should be a really awesome time tonight. I'm actually really looking forward to seeing Stone Cold Steve Austin. Getting some of that Steve Austin energy back in the building. Hopefully The Rock will be able to be there. I'm as a big fan of the Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard podcast. I'm really excited to see Brother Love. Hopefully it's more than just a quick shot in a backstage segment. I mean, best case scenario, bring out the old Brother Love set and let's do it. I'd settle for one in the ring, but hopefully they just kind of do a good little skit with him, because it's been really, that podcast has been really, really great. It's a great contributor to the WWE Network, kind of pushes you towards that. So I really feel that Bruce Pritchard deserves a good moment, and I'm expecting him to get a pretty big reaction. So along with all the other legends and stars that are showing up tonight, it's just going to be a really fun night, almost like a family reunion. And it's with all the current stars and the storylines heading towards the Royal Rumble, really feel like it's going to be a great night and a good way to celebrate 25 years. We're all wrestling fans. We all love this. We all love this stuff, and we all have different matches and moments that meant something to us. So it's going to be kind of a great night, just putting all that energy together with everyone and being able to watch the show. So thanks for everybody for watching this. Hopefully everybody enjoys the show tonight. Thanks for coming along for the ride. We'll see you soon down the road. Much love and God bless. Peace.